Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Humanist, in pursuit of flourishing, where we really are trying to get back to those days of being, the whole human and all the beautiful components kind of working together. And my next guest is in pursuit of that. Really an interesting story. Meredith, thanks for taking time out of your day and being a guest.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, as I said, I was kind of, checking out your website a little bit earlier and, reading your story. Very interesting. And, not unusual, I think, in a lot of ways, right? The growing up and kind of finding yourself in a spot where you're not sure where you belong in the world. And, and then also maybe not even realizing that we've got a little bit of depression happening, not even aware what it is. I don't feel my best. But people still show up, right? People, you showed up, like you said, you got your MBA, you did all these amazing things, but looking back, probably weren't happy, or happy in moments but just generally, I think that's a lot of people, and until at some point we kind of recalibrate as humans and we're like, okay, this is not normal. I shouldn't feel this way. I should feel different. I expect I would feel different. And you kind of start that pursuit of, what does a whole human look like? And that holistic approach. You tell us a little bit about your book, or maybe first is the journey of how do you end up writing a book? Because we all have every author has a story on how they started the book and why. And is it an internal thing or an external thing? How did you, your book's coming out soon. So tell us a little bit the journey of how did you end up with the idea and what's it been like? And then maybe take us into the story.
Yeah, thanks. So to go just all the way back for just a second, I loved writing as a little kid. I mean, I loved to run around in the woods, and then I loved writing stories about animals, and I just filled up journals with it. And when I was 12, I actually wrote a novel. So this is the one that's coming out is actually my second novel that I've written, first to be published. Awesome. Yeah. But I entered that novel. This is also probably something very familiar to many people. Entered that novel into my school's book contest. And, they were usually kind of short stories. They made me do illustrations because that's what they were expecting. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but okay. And then, so I entered it and it got the second to lowest possible score, which was just devastating.
Good place to start though.
Well, it didn't feel that way at the time. At the time, it just felt like total rejection, because I was so excited about this book. I thought everyone was going to love it as much as I did. And so it just kind of crushed my 12-year-old self. And so I stopped writing after that for a long time, wrote a few short stories in high school. But basically it was a slow road back to writing. And I started writing for my coaching blog. And then I started having ideas for short stories for that, kind of allegorical short stories. So I did those. And then finally, this is about 25 years after my, rejection, my initial rejection when I was 12, got the idea for a novel. So it was kind of coming back full circle when I did. And the way the idea came to me, I was on a walk near my house. I was heading back from the woods and I saw this robin, and there was just something about this robin's eyes that were just so knowing and wise and loving. And I just had this thought, like, human beings, we tend to put ourselves at the top of any hierarchy we're in. We think of ourselves as exceptional and better than everything else and more evolved and more all of this and all that. And I was like, what if that just weren't true? What if these animals were actually higher in the hierarchy than we are, or they know more than we do, or have something to offer, beyond what we think they do. And so from that, kind of a story evolved. And then as I was developing the story, I was kind of thinking about what do I wish I had known when I was 25, and going through that kind of difficult transition right after college when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life and everything felt uncertain and scary. And, it was hard to navigate. And I had a lot of friends who had a hard time navigating that time too. So, yeah. So I was kind of thinking, what do I wish I had known then? And then I also was thinking, with the natural world, we as human beings, we have this very fraught relationship with the natural world, and a very strained relationship. And so I was thinking, what would the natural world tell us if it could, if it had a voice? And so those are kind of the things that inspired the development of the novel.
As you're saying that, I'm a bit reminded of a podcast or a lecture I was listening to. And the person was sharing, humans are the only ones who aren't at home in our environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Powerful. You think about it. You're right. The robin is totally situated completely, and they're right where they belong. They're in the either north or in the springtime, in the summer, and they're in the south. I mean, so all animals are at home in their environment except us.
Yeah, and that, to tie it back to the depression that I felt, I feel like depression in a lot of ways, at least for me, it's different for everyone, but for me, it was a lot about disconnection from myself, disconnection from other people, and disconnection from the wider living world. So there's this, we are animals, human beings are animals, and we forget that. That's the title of my novel is This Animal Body, because our bodies, I feel like, connect us to that. And when we stop trying to make ourselves separate and better than and exceptional, then we realize we're actually part of something far larger than ourselves. We belong. There's a sense of belonging that we're missing out on because we're so intent on being different. But when we remember how similar we are, we get that sense of belonging to something larger. And that was really healing for me in terms of my own depression and mental health.
We have so much more in common. And we highlight we seem to highlight the differences, and at times, celebrate the difference, which is great. But it does lead to a fractional kind of a state, and everybody ends up, if you keep fractioning yourself and dividing, you end up very much alone, and look at yourself like a freak of nature, right? You don't have anything in common with anybody. You forget the fact that you have a lot in common. But we keep fractionalizing and hierarching the differences, and that ends up being, very, you're like without a purpose, right? You don't belong. You're not anchored.
Yeah.
You've gone back home. An interesting choice, right? I mean, it's grounding, so we talked a little bit about going, being in San Francisco, being very different from where you grew up. And then my immediate thing is, you go back, that's got to be kind of hard. And then also realize it, like you said, you can find your tribe there. But then I realized actually it's comforting going home, right? It's the known. I mean, you're in the South, right? You get boiled peanut, you see boiled peanut, all the smells and, the boiled peanuts and barbecue and a little bit of slang.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? You come back home and you kind of ground. Do you feel more grounded at home?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons I came back to Atlanta. Because I was in, as you said, I was in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and I loved it out there. It's beautiful, and there's such great culture, and I mean, it's so rich. There's so much out there, and I never felt rooted there. And I kind of, after 15 years, realized this. Even though all my friends were out there, my family was still in Atlanta, but all my social networks were out in the Bay Area. But I never felt rooted. And so finally I came back and I lived in Atlanta for a couple months to just try it out. And I realized, I feel so much more rooted here. And a lot of it is the forests here, the southeastern forests. I grew up with them and they feel like home. And the animals here feel like home. And the whole ecosystem. Yeah, it just feels like home. So I'm so much more grounded here. It just feels, it feels familiar. And it felt almost like it was calling me back eventually, And it just took me a while to hear that call.
My sister lives in Atlanta, and she has a house at Lake Howell. Yeah, Lake Howell. And I spent 2 months there, staring out at the pine forest. Just those pines. There's no, all the leaves, all the branches are high, and so it's a tree forest, right? You're just looking out, basically out a balcony, just looking at the trees out onto the lake. It's magical, very comforting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, our house right now, we have just trees in the back. In the summer, you can't even really see the other houses. So, and we're not far from, we're pretty close in town. So Atlanta's a pretty special city in that it was developed late. So we still have a lot of our original forest intact. So it's called the city in the forest a lot. And it's amazing. We have great blue herons and deer and coyote, raccoons, possums in our yard all the time,
Right.
So it's pretty special. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the book, a little bit more deeper, kind of, the story and what do you hope that readers, I mean, of course, everybody's interaction is different, but is there any kind of a takeaway that you hope that people get?
Yeah. That's a good question. Thanks. So the book is about a neuroscience PhD student, Frankie Connor, who's at UC Berkeley. So it takes place my old stomping grounds. And she is determined, after multiple failures, she's determined to succeed, and she really wants to show that she can become a neuroscientist. And ultimately, she wants to help find a cure for depression. She's really want to understand why she gets depressed and find a cure.
Okay.
But on her first day, she has this kind of series of failures, and then she meets this group of talking animals. And they know things that she doesn't know, scientific facts, things about the years before she was adopted, poems she's never heard of but are real. So she's put in a situation where she doesn't know what to believe, because she can't quite dismiss them as a dream, but she also can't believe that they're real. So she sets out to do some experiments and find out the truth about these animals and also what they're trying to tell her, because they have this urgent message for her, but they're refusing to say exactly what it is. So she's trying to figure out what they're trying to say and what's real and what the deal is with these animals.
Maybe she took psilocybin before she went to the forest the first time.
Maybe so.
And the animals were talking to me and they had a very important message.
Yeah, it does sound like that, doesn't it? No, she's totally sober at the time. So,
well, it is part of that vulnerability of failing, right? And being kind of at the end of your rope and distraught, and you're open.
Yeah,
you're really
exactly. Open. Yeah, and that's my experience with breakdowns. Is breakdowns are incredibly painful and difficult, and they're often the start of opening up and being able to. Things need to break down so that something else can be created. And so, I'm
the India story, right? The destroyer and creator, same person.
Yeah,
same
exactly.
God.
That's definitely my experience, is that things need to be destroyed in order to be created. And that the whole chaos before creation, it's a thing for a reason. It's across a lot of cultures. And that's how personal change works too, in my experience.
Yeah, I had a conversation a couple of days ago, and in that I got reminded of this this kind of phrase that I've switched, or at least with conversations with people over the last couple of years, and it's kind of repeated itself. But things happen. Why did that happen to me? The why it happens to me, and we start flipping the language around, and people start saying, why did this happen for me? What's the message in this? And so I think in destruction or depression, and you end up in a place where you are staring in the mirror, or screaming up at the sky, to whatever God you may, at some point, whoever you're cursing out, and and then finding there's and the gods are all kind of going, still doesn't get it. No, she doesn't get it. No, she doesn't see it. No, she still thinks she's the victim. And when we finally realize that actually, no, we're not. These are opportunities and people opening up another door for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a powerful switch to be able to start to see it that way, and it doesn't take away from the pain of it, right? And depression is incredibly painful and crushing, and it's not to say that it's all good and we should just think positively about it. But it's also true that my experience is that breakdown and that opening is really important too. And I think that's what, with the novel. So with my experience with depression, in some ways it felt like it kind of broke me into 1,000 different pieces. And then I had to see, so now what's left? And it forced me to see what is left when all of that breaks down. And I discovered kind of a deeper part of myself. I discovered, something deeper than my thoughts, my feelings, my fears, all of my concepts about myself, my failures, my imperfections. I found something deeper than that. And that's kind of what I brought to the book is, Frankie is anxious and depressed and is looking for how can you be safe in a world where everything falls apart and everything dies, and when you lose everything, how can you just live a life when everything is going to be lost? And so some of it is about her finding what is that. And again, it's kind of, so it's all about connection. How do we reconnect to ourselves and that deeper part of ourselves? And then from there, my experience is when we're living from that place, we're more connected to other people. And then we're also more connected to the wider living world.
Yes.
And conversely, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, conversely, other people in the wider living world can also help us find that connection within ourselves to that deeper part. So it kind of goes both ways.
You have to be in the place to hear that message, right?
For sure.
You have to be. And I think breaking into 1,000 pieces, the only parts you need to get back together, you got to get the foundation, the superstructure, throw some muscle on, but all that other stuff, the imperfections and all that other stuff is just junk you pick up along the way. You don't need that.
Yeah. And it doesn't really matter. It's not really who we are.
It's not who you are. It's absolutely true. Let's try a question out of the jar, Meredith. Got the perfect time to take a hard left turn, or not. Let's see what the jar delivers for you. Okay. Maybe we didn't get to this part yet, but it seems like you got close to it. So the jar has a question. What was the lowest point in your life?
Yeah.
Seems like we got close to that.
Yeah.
But
so I would say
we didn't get to the prickly part yet.
Yeah. There were a couple very low points, but I think that probably the lowest was when I was in high school and I was first depressed. And I just, I had tried therapy and I tried, I don't know, that was pretty much all I tried, but I had just been with this and I would just cry for hours at a time and just feel totally hopeless and despairing. And it just felt like it was never going to change. And I started to feel like it was going to be like this forever. And I got really despairing. And I started having thoughts. What actually prompted me to try antidepressant medication was that I started having thoughts of, I want to die. And I knew I didn't want to die. I mean, fortunately, I always had that awareness. So I never got very far with it, but it felt like death was the only thing that was stronger than this misery and this pain. And so that scared me enough to be willing to try kind of anything, which I think is one of the things that actually helped me is a willingness to try anything, because it takes time, right? It takes trial and error to see what's going to help you.
To really break you down, it takes.
Yeah. And it's different for everyone, what helps. And so, so being able to try different things and see, and that time the medication really did help me, and it lifted me out. And then in the future, didn't always work and I had to find other things, but at that time it was enough. So, yeah.
Hang on one sec. There you are. It's interesting. That's again, not an unusual story, right? I mean, how many, and especially I think teenage girls going through this. Were people aware of how depressed you were? Did you hide it, or was it open? Did your mom and dad know? Friends?
Yeah, so different levels. My mom and dad and my sister knew, and they were concerned and trying to get me help and things, to the point where, I mean, even before I was aware it was a problem, they were telling me, let's do something about this. And I was kind of thinking like,
it's not normal, Meredith.
Yeah, but it seemed normal, right? Because teenagers are miserable a lot of the time, right? So it seemed like this was normal. And to your point earlier, if I hadn't gotten really depressed, I think I probably would have just gone through life with a low level misery, not realizing that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. But I did, So my family knew, but my friends didn't. And it was only kind of years and years later, I thought I was the only one. And then years and years later, I realized like, many of my friends in high school were depressed too, right? And, and so we had this kind of aha moment that if only we had shared this when we were in it, we could have found a lot of support, but we didn't. So it was mostly just my family who knew. I was always able to function well. So I was still making straight A's. I was doing sports. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, which is actually, I think, part of the problem. But yeah, I was always able to keep functioning despite the depression.
Yeah, functioning, like a functional alcoholic, functioning depression. Yeah.
Yeah.
Humans are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You look back, you could do all of that and still be in an absolute, like mentally in a really rough place.
Yeah.
But still perform.
Yeah.
You think it's is it a teenage book? Is it a book, would it help? You think it would help other, especially maybe women? I think, maybe not, doesn't matter, but you think it would help teenage girls?
I do. Yeah, I actually had teenagers in mind when I wrote it, kind of that age from like 15 to 25, which I know is a large range. But I had teenagers in mind when I wrote it. And then it turns out for marketing the book, if the protagonist isn't a teenager, you can't market it to teenagers. That's just how the industry works. This is what I learned. But yeah, I do think it could be beneficial for teenagers. And really anyone who is sensitive, who knows, the gifts and the challenges of being sensitive, anyone who loves animals in the natural world and wants a greater connection to them, anyone who struggles with depression and anxiety. But yeah, particularly I do think teenagers.
It's probably great. I mean, to reach that audience, maybe it's talks and, sharing it at places where teenagers are so they can find the book, right? So to find the message, to find the message. Let's try another question real quick. I kind of get my brain around another work question.
Sure.
I like that last one. It's almost like the jar is listening sometimes.
Yeah.
We didn't get that story out of you. So it's like, okay, ask this question.
That's great.
Ooh, so this is I almost had the opposite question of this in my mind for you. So this is interesting. So jar question for Meredith. Do you believe evil exists?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think it depends on how you define evil. So I think we are all capable of great evil, but I don't think we are evil. So I kind of think of who we are. I think we are fundamentally love and goodness. And I think that because of pain and trauma and things that can happen, we become capable of, very evil things.
Yeah, that's the way you said that, the way I articulated that's really interesting. I think you're right. I think we are love. I think we are just general. And you look at how you start out. I mean, I'm here with my daughter, and the grandson is, we got two granddaughters, a little bit older, 7 and 4. But the babyish, right, 10 months old, and it's just pure love. He didn't have anything in his heart, or like you look at him and you just like that smile, the way they look at you, you look at infants. So we are pure love, right? We are really, truly love. And so evil, like you said, trauma and the other things that create that negative space for negativity, and then bad people and bad acts to exist. That's kind of do you have tell us about the characters in the book. Do you have the bad guy, the bad doggy, or the bad duck? Is it a bad duck or a bad Wolverine or a bad human?
There's no bad animals. And the main antagonist in the book is depression. So it's really, that's the kind of the biggest threat. But there is a professor, Frankie's, one of her professors is very dismissive and plays a little bit of the antagonist character in it. He, believes that animals are not very intelligent and kind of this old school in that way. So he pushes back against her feeling that animals are capable of more than we give them credit for. So yeah.
Are you going to reignite your first novel? Is there a novel in there?
The first novel, no, I would not publish that. It was it was great for a 12-year-old, and I loved writing it. And there's some good things about it. But it's not really something I want to share more broadly with the world.
You wouldn't want that. A double rejection would be really tough.
That would be tough. Yeah. And it's one of those things, I think not everything is designed to be shared with the world. that one maybe at the time, but not anymore. But I am working on another novel now, and I have idea for a third. So we'll see. It all takes. I'm a slow writer. It takes me a long time to kind of develop things, but we'll see where it goes. I think there's a good chance there will be more.
What's the purpose, if you're to look back? What's the reason? If the universe existed in some pure diabolical state to teach you a lesson, maybe not diabolical, but for fun. Why the rejection? Why the absolute rejection of your first try? Because had it gone perfectly, it's a different outcome.
Yeah.
And so what do you feel there's a reason if you look back? Is there a lesson in there that you learned that you're like, oh, I get it now, or no, that was just crappy and there was no lesson in there and that was stupid?
Yeah, I think it's both. I always think it's both. So I think it's just kind of crappy on one level, but I do. I mean, I think for me, what it's really helped with is recognizing what's important. So if I just had incredible success with everything that I wrote, and I was a best-selling author and getting awards, and Oprah was recommending my books, right? I think then I would think that that's the important thing. And those outcomes are the important thing. And so not getting all of that has really forced me to dig deep and see, so why do I do this? And what are my intentions with this? And I found it's really, really helpful to have intentions and goals and purpose that are not around outcomes. Like I'm going to sell this many books, or I'm going to, get this many awards. It's really helpful to have them things that are just what I want to do for their own sake. And so for this book, it's a message that I feel like is really important in our world. There's so much breakdown around disconnection right now, so much suffering because we're disconnected from ourselves and other people and the wider living world.
Yeah.
And this book is really a roadmap back to connection. And so so that's my purpose, is I want to, whoever can benefit from that, I want to offer this, to them, for them. And also just, things that I get out of it. It's fun to create. It's, it's fun to learn things. And so there's a lot of things that are more important than book sales and recognition and things like that. Of course I want them, I haven't either. Like, yes, I would love all those things, but they're not what really matter. And I can be really fulfilled and have a lot of fun and joy with it without all those things. So rejection helped me to figure that out, what really matters.
Yeah, and prepare. Yeah. Interesting, right? You look back a little bit of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also getting to learn that it's not about me, right? Like that's something I feel like we all have to learn, because we're all going to be rejected multiple times in our lives. And I love there's a phrase, saying that like if you didn't get rejected today, you might not be doing what you should be, or putting yourself
not trying
out there
hard. Yeah, you're not trying hard enough, right? Yeah.
Like this is just normal. We should be getting rejected regularly. So learning that it's not so much about me, and that there are going to be people who don't at all resonate with the book, or who resonate with me, and that's going to be true no matter what. And there are going to be some people who love it, and it really resonates with, and it can really help. And so, just learning that it's not so much about me. It's just about kind of finding the right fit, and knowing that those folks are out there.
What do your clients look like right now? How do your, what's that perfect client look like? Or, you can't get too specific, but what do clients look like right now for you?
Yeah. So there are a lot of, typically they're unhappy. They're kind of miserable in their current jobs, but they don't know what would make them happy, what they want to do, what would be fulfilling. And so they come to me so we can go through a process of kind of really remembering who they are and what brings them alive, and what their core gifts are, and what the impact they want to have on the world. I lost touch with my own gifts and joys and for so long. That magic, right? That what's magic for us. And so it's really fun to help other people rediscover what that is. And find ways to bring it into their lives in practical ways.
Yeah. I think it is. I mean, the coaching, this idea of coaching is just so blown my mind. The opportunity for people to connect with each other, and
Mhm.
if I think if you need some guidance and you can recognize that, and you're vulnerable enough, and you find somebody you mesh with, I mean, it could be a
Mhm.
really powerful change for somebody. Even
Mhm.
I think the difference, between a therapist listens and really doesn't offer advice, right? They hold that mirror up. And I think
Mhm.
coaching does a little bit does a bit of both.
Mhm.
Does that listening, holds the mirror up, but also opens some doors and, lets people peek inside this door and that door. And I don't know, maybe a
Mhm.
great analogy, but I think it is a hero's work, right? It's a hero's work listening to somebody and trying to help them get to that happy place, right? Where everything's
Mhm.
ingiri, the Japanese idea, where you're doing what you love, and the society finds it valuable, you can get paid, you know,
Mhm.
all those beautiful things come together.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think coaching offers more action. There's action steps after every session, so it's not just about the action steps, but
Yeah.
I think it is helpful to have that kind of concrete things you can do and to take it forward.
Accountability.
Accountability, yeah, yeah. And then also it's seeing the good in people when they can't see it for themselves, or seeing the possibility when they can't see it for themselves. So a lot of people, when I start working with them, just feel like they're kind of desperate enough to try it, but they don't fully believe that it's possible.
Yes. Yeah.
And so holding that, being able to see that possibility for them when they can't, and the goodness in them, and see how many gifts they have, just how much they have to offer and contribute to the world when they can't see it themselves. That I think goes a long way too, because eventually they'll start to see it, but they sometimes need someone to offer that bridge until it starts to become apparent.
That'd be fascinating, right? Because you're talking probably typically people who are successful, or,
Mm-hmm.
had success at one point, and to sit there and hear their story and go, "No, you are an amazing human. Let's go through
Mm-hmm.
the list." And they're
Yeah,
like, "No, not really, not really." I could imagine these are like dumbfounding conversations because they're so beaten down or depressed, in a
yeah,
place where they can't see how
yeah.
special they are.
Yeah, yeah, because they're in a toxic environment, or they're just in a job that
Yeah.
hasn't been a good fit, so they haven't been using their core gifts,
Mm.
or yeah, whatever it is, the feedback they've gotten has been negative. It's amazing how much we internalize that and how much it affects our sense of self worth and our identity. So yeah, it can take a while for people to really realize, like, oh, actually, yeah, I do have all these great things to give the world. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and to let themselves believe it too. I think a lot of people are afraid of
Yeah.
being arrogant, and so I always, it's like we have to remember there's a whole spectrum between there. I have nothing of value to offer, and I'm totally better than everybody else. There's a whole lot of gray area in between where we can own our gifts and know, yeah, I do have special things to offer, and they're really needed and wonderful, and so does everyone else. So it's not like I'm better than anybody, and it's not like I do them perfectly,
Mm.
and it's not like I don't have many flaws too. Our flaws are just the flip sides of our strengths. So of course we have flaws. We can't get rid of our flaws without getting rid of our strengths. So it's recognizing the both and in it. But yeah, it's hard to give ourselves credit for our strengths.
Yeah, it's funny, even though this is also even something I think I've struggled with, which is owning your gifts and stepping into your strengths, and, puffing your chest up a little bit, and,
Mm-hmm.
asking for the light to shine, turn the light on,
Mm-hmm.
spotlight number 4, calling out the spotlight of life and say, "It's
Mm-hmm.
okay, shine up a little brighter, a little
Mm-hmm.
brighter." And
Yeah.
I think a lot of us struggle with that, unless you also meet people with an unhealthy ego, right? A
Mm-hmm.
super powerful ego, right? To a point of unhealthy.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we see those people sometimes, and you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
And, or you're crushed in grade school with not your first novel, and, you kind of want to ask everybody turn the lights off. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you still feel like there's a spotlight on you.
Yeah.
You can't escape it. It's an interesting life is an interesting journey. You really did take. I like your story partly because part of the story I like for you is the change, the absolute flip your life upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, leave all your friends, leave these those college and post-college relationships, your stomping grounds, and to go back home, or to go to a new place, right? But it was a familiar place. Takes a lot of courage to toss your life away and to start over.
It does, and a little bit of stupidity, because at the same time that
Amen to that. Amen to that.
At the same time I moved cross country to come home, I also was just getting started as a coach. And then I also decided that would be a good time to go off my antidepressant medication. And so I did all of those, at the same time. Predictably slid back into depression. But anyway, I found this is where I was forced to kind of find, okay, so how do I support my system now? And that's when I really got back into the woods and nature and walking and getting to know my wild neighbors and learning from them. I mean, I've learned so much from the natural world about how to be more peaceful and manage the anxiety and that kind of thing. So it was ultimately a good thing, because it kind of forced me to find some of those things. But yeah, I wouldn't really necessarily recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, well, we have our, like you said, a little bit of stupidity. We all have our. I definitely have got my own stupidity path. You gotta have I'd love to have a little confessional, right? My trying to think of my my forgive me for I have done some pretty stupid things. Let me list out the things I've done, which I would probably, if I could do over, I might. I don't know. We never have do-overs, right, in life.
Yeah.
There are no do-overs. We just kind of accept it and move on.
Yeah, and it got you to where you are, which is a good thing. So you gotta remember that too. But yeah.
That's an interesting thing. I did my jar podcast. I traveled around the country and interviewed 300 people with these questions. And, I met some people who had some very rough roads. They had some tough stories in life, some of them self-inflicted, some of them inflicted upon people, and nobody would change their story. Meredith, everybody, no, that wouldn't change anything. That's who I am now. Part of that's my, that made me who I am. And I think it works for you too. You are a credible coach in that space of what you've been through. Right. So you have your own story, which is going to be as good as anybody else's story. So there's no one-upping me. You've got your own journey. And so I think that does lend some credibility when people can see how you found your own path, and kind of hope you can guide me there as well. Reaching out.
Yeah, and it's an incredible gift. I think, I have all these, I work with clients a lot who are so afraid of making the wrong turn or feel embarrassed about wrong turns that they've made in the past. And it's so easy to feel that way, because that's what we're taught in our culture, right? We're supposed to have this straight path to success, and we're supposed to just know immediately what we want to do. And my thing is, some of my favorite people had really crooked paths and took a long time to get where they are.
Yeah.
And there's so much they have to offer now, because there's something so special about someone who's been through the pain that you've been through. Someone else who's trained to deal with it, that's one thing, it's helpful. But when someone has been through it themselves, it's an incredible gift. And I actually I have a lot of my clients write the story of their lives as a hero's journey, because it's really powerful to look back at instead of looking at what we wish we'd done differently or the mistakes we made, if we can look at them as challenges that we overcame, that we learned from. And then that gave us a boon to share with the world. It's a huge boon, all of these challenges and mistakes and failures and things. It's really actually incredible that we have so many people so gifted to share these things,
I love that, the hero's journey. Yeah, because everything happens, doesn't happen to you, right? It happens, in that hero's journey, it's for you or part of your fabric that becomes useful to somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not always about you.
Yeah. And without those challenges, there is no boon. That's how the hero gets the boon, is through the challenges. And so I think we want to skip the challenges, and we're taught that we should be able to, but that's not the way life works, and that's not where the good stuff is.
I was just trying to remember this conversation a couple of days ago when we talked about the word purpose. And I'll have to go back now. It's really bugging me for the last 10 minutes in my brain. About people not knowing your purpose, right? And even when you find your purpose, this air quotes, kind of throw up air quotes, and actually while it sounds great, I know your purpose. Actually, purpose sounds like a burden in a way, right? I'm trying to shy away from that word now, and I can't remember the other word that I'm supposed to be using, but it's not purpose anymore, right? Because it feels like a burden. It feels like something you have to do versus somewhere you're kind of liberated and uncovered your gifts and the things you can be doing. I'm going to forget the word. I'll find it somewhere.
Yeah, I would love to hear what it is. I think purpose, it's like passion, purpose. They get these connotations that feel like, oh my God, I have to figure this thing out. And then it has to be huge. It has to be monumental. It has to be like, and this amazing thing that I do. This is where the natural world has been so helpful to me. Because when I observe, even my backyard, I see squirrels. They're running around. They're getting acorns and nuts. They're burying them. Sometimes they forget them, and then they grow up. The acorns grow into trees, right? The bees, there's some quote that you can't convince me bees are not like loving every minute of when they're pollinating the flowers. Like they just look so happy. They're running around. Yeah, they're getting their pollen, they're getting their nectar. And they're also ensuring the survival of plants, right? They're allowing plants to reproduce, which then allows other animals who eat the plants to survive and reproduce. So they're basically continuing life on this planet when they're joyfully gathering their nectar. I don't know if they're really joyful. They seem joyful to me. So
they look pretty happy. I mean, that's a fun job, right? Flying flower, and you go back to see your buddies. You're on this great mission. You fly. I don't know, those guys fly far, right?
It's pretty nice, right? Yeah, you tell them
all the way home.
You found over there. Yeah. So what I realized is over time, as I kind of learned about the ecosystem, every animal, every plant, every being in the ecosystem has a role that they play that supports the rest of the ecosystem, supports life, continues life. And it's an important role, right? They're all needed. And they do it. This is the thing that blew my mind. They do it not by working really hard and going to night classes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like they don't, try to solve their weaknesses and become better animals. They just do what comes to them naturally. That's what they're doing. They're just doing what comes to them naturally. There's an ease to it. Not that it's never hard work, not that it's always fun, but they're just doing what comes naturally. And so when I realized this, it was like, I don't have to try so hard. I don't have to really like make sure I'm doing the right thing and make sure it has this huge impact and try to figure out what my purpose is. I just have to do what comes to me naturally and just share that.
Yeah, you don't see the robin running around trying to get, swallow acorns.
Yeah, no. And it's not going, did I get enough worms today? Did I sing enough songs? Was my song perfect? Was everybody listening? Was it happy enough? Did I hit the right notes? Like they just share for the joy of the song, or whatever it is that's motivating that song. They just share it.
I read the other day, I can't remember where it was, that one of the reasons why do birds sing before the sun. And apparently they've discovered that the frequency or the sound in some birds opens up. It's a message to some trees or flowers that the sun's rising and it's time to open.
Oh, wow.
So they're actually singing on everything's a frequency, everything's a vibration. So the vibration that they're sending at that frequency resonates with certain trees in the area that they live. And it's a signal to the trees that the sun's rising. And it's time to turn your leaves, or it's time to open up your flowers and prepare for the day.
That's beautiful.
So stuff we can't see or observe. And, and just nature is absolutely wild.
It is.
Think about it.
It's always felt magical to me because there's so much possibility in it. I think in depression, it feels like there's no possibility, right? Nothing is possible. Everything is going to be bad and be like this, and nothing's ever going to be good or change. And so for me, the natural world is this antidote to that, because anything is possible. And there's laws of science and things. I'm not denying that. It's just that there's so much we don't understand about it. There's so much that goes on under the surface, like you're talking about with the birds singing, right?
Crazy.
Or the relationship between bees and flowers. They found that there are electrical signals that flowers send to bees to let them know there's no more pollen, no more nectar in them, because it changes. The electricity changes and the bees can sense that. There's whole worlds in the soil that, play incredibly important roles, as they break material down so that plants can, use the dead material again. And we have no idea about it. Like, it's just, there's so much out there, and we're learning a lot more, but there's still so much we don't know. It just feels like so much is possible, because the natural world is just so vast and complex and dynamic.
Plants, animals, and mycelium. It's the third kingdom. So the stuff underneath the soil, right? The mycelium network, where mushrooms flower from and come from, that absolutely breaks down forests, eats trees. That is wild stuff. And apparently you can tell trees use it as a communication network. It can send water from one tree to another. If I'm a little bit lower on I'm lower on the slope and it's been a dry season, I can send water to you.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? And sometimes
that's intelligence, right? That's consciousness.
They can warn other trees about insects or diseases that are coming, so they can prepare. They can. I've even read that trees, when they're dying, will sometimes release their resources into the network so that other trees can use them. And there are some trees they call mother trees that tend to give more resources around to the smaller trees around them that might not have access to as much sunlight.
I have seen
sometimes.
that. Yeah, I read that article.
It's just incredible.
Mother trees. Let's try another question from the jar.
Okay.
I'm going down deep. I never really picked questions from the jar. It was always my guests. So it's interesting for me to kind of put my hand in there.
Can I ask you a question about how you choose them? Do you use your intuition and feel around, or how do you choose?
Yeah, it's just kind of poking around until something kind of loose. You kind of dig, because there's 400 in this jar, and they're crammed in there, and they're quite thick. They're like it's like a double playing card. Maybe 2 or 3 playing cards put together. It's you kind of hear the plasticness of it, and so I just kind of put my hand in there. It is a little bit of a feely, and then one's pop. You're kind of trying to grab one, and all of a sudden one kind of pops into your fingers. It's great. The other day I had I was chatting with a guest, and he asked the question. It was about a job. When was the last job that you really enjoyed? What was your most recent, the last job that you really enjoyed? Let's call it that question. And he proposed that as somebody asking him, and he was answering a question, and he was, kind of pontificated off of that. And, about 10 minutes later, I pulled a question from the jar, and it was, what was the last job you really enjoyed? He literally expressed the exact question that I pulled from the jar.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. I just find, intuition that happens. It just happens a lot, and it's actually something that I've really leaned into a lot. It's helped me a lot in terms of my healing. Yeah,
it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing, and it's wonderful to be able to draw on it, because that kind of thing happens. Yeah,
it does. And I've had it. I mean, with these jars, I've had it happen many, many times. I have many stories, and even I do question of the day for fun. I carry business cards. I made these questions into my business card. And each card has a different question.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of fun. So I can meet people and just offer up a question of the day and let them, I'll open up and spread them out like a deck of cards, and maybe there's 10 or 30 in there, and people pull questions, and that's been fascinating. I've done that a couple thousand times in the last 2 years, and just some of the stories people get these questions, and it's just wild. Their answers, or how the question is the perfect question for them at that moment. And they'll tell me the story. It's just, I sat there and just flabbergasted.
That's so cool. Yeah.
This is a good one for you. I like this. So a question from the jar for Meredith. When was the last time someone asked you, how are you really? And you felt they meant it?
That's a good question.
It's tough. And it could be a tough one too, depending upon
I think I'm lucky. I have some people in my life who ask me that regularly and are really open for whatever answer. And I'm going to say it was just a few days ago, my husband, Elton, he he asked me kind of the standard, how are you doing? Yeah. But if I say, I'm okay, he'll say, well, why? Why are you just okay?
Yeah.
And then he really listens. And I have a friend who sent me a text, and when I texted back an emoji, she checked in with me a couple of days later. She's like, that's not like you to just respond with an emoji. She's like, are you okay? What's going on? Tell me how you're doing. So I'm lucky that I have.
Girls are good like that. Dang it. No hiding from the girlfriends.
They know. Yeah, they know. So I'm lucky to have a few people in my life like that.
I just encourage, people listening on the, especially people on the audio platforms, ask the question. There's that somebody you need to ask that question to. And hey, sometimes I shy away from even asking that because you have to be ready. You have to be in a space where you're ready for what may come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You can't take that question lightly. You have to ask it in a place where you're ready to hear what may come of it.
And when you really want to know, because I think people can sense when you don't really want to know. So you have to have some genuine interest. Yeah,
absolutely. How about some final thoughts, Meredith? We're probably in a great spot. That's a great question to kind of leave people hanging with. Any kind of final thoughts? Anything, maybe a message you want to leave, or, what's that message you leave for a prospective client or a prospective book reader? Can you pull those two into one? Is that one answer, or are those two is that one message, or those two messages?
That's a good question. I think it can be one message. I think for a lot of it comes down to trust, to just recognizing that we are wired. We are, like we said before, we are love, and we are wired for connection, and we are wired to care about the beings around us. And so ultimately, I think it's not that we have to make something happen or learn something or figure something out. It's really more about peeling away the layers and just relaxing. Because if we can just relax into a deeper sense of who we are without all the other stuff that gets in the way, all the trying, all the efforting, all the defenses, all of that is actually what gets in the way. But if we can just kind of relax and really get down to the core of who we are and just trust that will lead us to, a lovely career path. It will lead us to wonderful relationships. It will lead us into connection with the wider living world. It'll, and just fulfillment and joy and all of that. So it's not that we need to do something so much as just relax and trust what's there.
Okay. I've wrapped it up for you. I have a Ken summary. We're love.
Okay, great.
We're love. We're connected, and we're caring, right? We're caring people. And then be the best squirrel you can be.
Absolutely. I love that. Yes. Be the best squirrel you can be.
Be the best squirrel you can be. I mean, that's, do what squirrels do. Don't try to pull worms, just be an awesome squirrel.
Yeah.
I do love, your journey's great, Meredith. Thank you for sharing it, your story. And I think you're in that space, you found your gift and sharing it. I can't wait for your book to come out. So I think that's kind of cool. We've got this little episode. You can kind of use this to, little pieces of it. To kind of share part of the message inside the book. I think you really articulated how you got there, really well. It's really interesting.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And I really appreciate all your great questions and being on the show. And it seems like you're really, sharing your gifts with the world in some really beautiful ways too. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening and supporting The Humanist. We're kind of in that pursuit of flourishing, and just great to hear stories like Meredith, kind of hearing your own journey. You're kind of finding that path to flourishing, and I think along the way, dragging or opening up a lane for other people to kind of find their space.
Trying to, yeah.
Sure. Very awesome. Thanks again, everybody. And Meredith, hang on for 10 seconds. I'll see you on the other side.
Okay.
Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricate